a selfless and caring mother of 3.
She always thought about other people. She was just a bright light shining.
Viciously murdered in her own home.
Her bedroom was incredibly blood-soaked, unlike I'd ever seen before.
There was anger involved in this crime.
I remember just screaming.
Investigators are sent down a rabbit hole of suspects.
She didn't like him, she didn't trust him.
It raised a red flag that there might be some sort of affair going on.
She was jealous of her life, of what she had.
There was clearly bad blood between them.
Every lead appears to turn into a dead end.
It just stalled.
That was disheartening.
Until a surprising witness comes forward.
It was unbelievable.
It was the break we were looking for.
Exposing a killer no one saw coming.
I was pretty shocked.
I just remember being sick to my stomach.
Cortland Township lies in the heart of Michigan.
It's fairly rural, nice, pleasant, kind of a good hometown feel. It's one of those areas that everybody gets along, and when you're driving by their house, they're waving at you, and it's just peaceful and quiet.
This quaint community is stunned on Saturday, August 5th, 2006, when the Kent County Sheriff's Office receives a 911 call.
Emergency.
My daughter, we just found her in bed, and she's got a lash on her arm, and she's all bloody.
Just before 5 o'clock, we received a call of a potential suicide at the Pagel residence.
Officers are immediately dispatched to the home of 41-year-old Renee Pagel.
We were met by Renee's stepmother and her father. They were both just in shock. Renee's father indicated that his daughter was in her bedroom. When I first walked into the bedroom, I observed Renee laying on the bed. I could just remember seeing all the blood-soaked sheets, her shirt. There's blood on her face. It was obvious that Renee Pagel was deceased, and it wasn't a suicide. This was a homicide.
Officers secure the scene as homicide detectives arrive to investigate.
Her bedroom was incredibly blood-soaked, unlike I'd ever seen before. The bed was covered with blood. There was blood spatter on the walls, on the ceiling.
She was stabbed multiple times. I was pretty shocked by the amount of wounds that she had. When I looked at her hand, I saw a large laceration almost in the middle of her hand to be, in my opinion, a defensive wound. Renee was in the fight for her life. Unfortunately, she had lost.
For detectives, the viciousness of the attack is a clue itself.
It appears to us it's a crime of passion. Somebody has something against this victim, so much so that they want to brutalize this person as much as they possibly could.
This was personal.
Somebody went into that residence to murder Renee.
Who in Renee's life would want to attack her and could be capable of such violence? Born in 1965, Renee's spirit was always full of joy.
Renee was the most generous person I have ever known. She loved life. She was always smiling.
Renee Pagel devoted her life to helping others.
She was a nurse practitioner. She had done medical mission trips around the world, and then she also worked at a homeless clinic here in town. She always thought about other people.
Renee's greatest joy was being a mother of 3.
She loved her kids so much. She was a great mom.
Recently separated from Michael, her husband of 10 years, Renee shared custody of her children while always remaining a devoted mother.
The last couple years, because she wanted to be home with her kids and wanted to have some more normal hours, she chose to teach at a technical center.
Even as a teacher, Renee found new ways to help people.
One of her students had come into class one day and was really down, and Renee said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Well, my dad is dying. He needs a kidney." And so Renee agreed to give her kidney to this man who she had never met. She was just so selfless. And it manifested itself in so many ways.
Renee had undergone the kidney transplant surgery just 5 days before her stunning death.
So she was already in a weakened state when she was attacked.
Could the killer have timed the attack, knowing that Renee would be recuperating? Detectives look closer at her injuries, hoping they'll reveal telling details about the murder weapon.
It seemed to be a very strong and well-made knife, and large. Just the amount of damage it did to the victim's body, it was at least an inch and a half blade that was wide.
There's no sign of the knife, but forensic technicians searched the bedroom for other evidence.
There was large amounts of blood that our scientific support unit had to collect, and they collected trace evidence like hairs and fibers for testing.
Detectives continue to search the rest of the home.
What struck me about this case that was kind of odd, there was no other areas in the house that were disturbed, that were bloody or anything tracked to the home. It seemed to be very honed in on just her bedroom.
It really kind of puzzled us as investigators.
It was the most bizarre scene I've ever been on.
This person, in my opinion, had to know that they had to cover their tracks, and I think it was planned, and they thought this out ahead of time.
As forensics continue their work, detectives speak with Renee's parents.
Her father, obviously, he was extremely upset. What he had just found out, his daughter brutally murdered.
Detectives ask her father to help them put together a picture of Renee's last known movements.
He last saw her the night before around 4 or 5 in the evening when he was picking up the children and bringing them to their father's house, who lived approximately 15 to 20 minutes away from Renee.
With Renee's children safe with their father at the time of the murder, she was home alone.
He told us he spoke with her on the phone around 8 or 9 in the evening, just checked in on her because obviously he had a lot of concern of her health.
Based on the state of the body, detectives believe Renee was murdered sometime between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. They ask her parents who Renee might have seen last.
Her father talked to me about a tenant, Mike Decker, who was an acquaintance of Renee that has been living on the property for approximately 1.5 years, 2 years. Also, he did speak about a contentious divorce with her husband, Michael, that she was going through. Mike wanted full custody. Mike wanted the home. Mike wanted to not work and have Renee work and be the provider. So that obviously piqued my interest.
Could either of these men have possibly wanted Renee dead? Detectives know they have to hit the ground running right away.
We have to find out who all these people are and go and start to question them to try to find out where they were on the night of the murder.
Coming up, investigators uncover an ominous obsession.
There was a lot of writings about his hatred for Renee.
Alarming secrets.
The ceiling had a hidden compartment.
Renee told me how betrayed she felt.
She was extremely upset. She was very hurt by this.
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We've never had a break like this.
It was, you're not gonna believe this. Just disbelief.
I'm still reeling from that one.
Detectives in a small Michigan town are investigating the vicious murder of 41-year-old mother of 3, Renee Pagel. Police are looking into 2 possible suspects, her tenant and her estranged husband. They first turn their attention to Renee's ex, Michael Pagel.
In the beginning, They seem like your average all-American couple.
She did tell me that she did love him. She wanted marriage in a family, and he was the opportunity.
She looked at him, I think the words were the knight in shining armor. And speaking to friends of the family, they described Michael as a fantastic dad, that he was always about his children. Nobody said anything bad about him.
Married life seemed like a dream come true until cracks started to appear.
When I interviewed numerous people, I was told that Mike didn't want a full-time job. Mike wanted to be at home with the kids and let Renee do everything and support him. They were just having a lot of issues back and forth with one another. In early 2005, Mike abruptly surprised Renee with divorce papers.
She was very shocked and just sickened to the core.
There had been some turmoil in the past between them, but in her mind, things were actually getting better. They were kind of turning around, so she was blindsided by it.
She said to me, he expected, I mean expected, the house, the kids, and $2,000 a month.
In June 2006, just 7 weeks before she was murdered, Renee and Michael had their day in divorce court.
When the judge ruled in her favor and said that she got the kids, she got the house, and he was going to have to get a better paying job, something flipped in him.
Was Michael so angered by the ruling that he killed Renee in a furious rage?
There were a lot of things that put him at the top of our list as a potential suspect that had killed Renee.
Detectives go to question Michael.
When we arrived at Mike's house, he was not there. His mother said that he should be back shortly. And I said, just want to get an idea of what were you guys doing last night? And she said, well, Mike had the kids. They were having a fortnight in the living room where Mike had set up some pillows and some blankets. Then she stated about 8 in the morning, she and Michael had a brief conversation, and then they went about their day. So basically, she was giving him an alibi that he was home all night with the kids.
As police finish the interview with his mother, Michael arrives.
I explained to him that something had happened to Renee, and we would like to speak to you about this. When Michael was told that she had passed away, there was no reaction out of him. And immediately, without me even going any further, Michael reached into his wallet and gave me an attorney card and said, yeah, I've been told not to talk to the police. Here's my attorney. So I thought that was extremely odd that Michael didn't want to dig further into what happened to Renee.
After consulting with his divorce attorney, he told investigators he wouldn't answer any questions.
Michael's reticence to cooperate is a red flag. And on August 6th, the day after Renee's murder, police arrive at his home with a search warrant.
We're looking for any type of knife that may have been used during the murder. We took a lot of knives from the house, but we found no knives that matched the length and the size and the different characteristics of the knife that was used.
Police also collect hair samples and fingerprints from Michael.
We wanted to get photos of his body to make sure that there was no cuts or anything on him. We wanted to look at clothing to see if there was any blood trace evidence anywhere.
All the forensic evidence that we collected, we never found anything that was useful in our investigation.
All the knives in his home were examined, and there was nothing to link them to this crime.
We had no murder weapon. We had no real evidence. There was nothing. It was clean.
So when we left that search warrant, I would say we really came out empty-handed. We didn't have anything to tie this murder to Mike Pagel.
Despite his potential motive, Michael Pagel drops off detectives' list of suspects, while news of Renee's violent death quickly spreads across town.
Her friend called me and said, Chris, Renee's dead. It was surreal. I remember curling up in a fetal position and just screaming. I screamed. I was angry.
As her friends and loved ones struggle with her death, Renee's autopsy report comes in.
Cause of death was blunt force trauma, homicide. It was a large, heavy-duty knife that was used on her.
The autopsy revealed upwards of 50 stab wounds. There were numerous lacerations to the hands and the feet, suggesting defensive wounds.
She was stabbed over 50 times. I'm still reeling from that one. It was so brutal.
Detectives continue their investigation and now focus their attention on Renee's tenant, Mike Decker.
She had this barn that had an upstairs apartment, and he was a renter.
The barn was about 75 yards away from the main home. He could have been involved, he could have been a witness, he could have overheard something. One of her friends believed that the week of her surgery, Renee was going to have pizza with Mike Decker, and that she felt that there was some type of maybe a relationship going on. So that sparked our interest. I mean, if he's having a relationship with Renee, did something happen to cause him to get upset and potentially do this horrific crime? We had to find him immediately.
2 days into the investigation of Renee Pagel's murder, detectives have a possible suspect. Her tenant, Mike Decker, who's rumored to be romantically involved with Renee. Detectives interview Mike at his apartment on Renee's property.
At first, I kind of thought loner, 30-year-old gentleman, unemployed, living above a barn. I thought that was kind of odd. When we were speaking to Mr. Decker, we asked him if he was having a relationship with Renee, romantic or whatnot.
Mike said that the relationship was more of a friendship or a kindness thing, no romantic involvement.
He denied having any dinner with Renee over the past week. He stated that it was actually a month or two before he suggested that they go out for pizza just as friends, but Renee had turned that down because she was busy.
Police ask Mike Decker where he was on the night of the murder.
He stated that he went into a local city to eat by himself, drove back probably between 8 or 9. When he arrived at home, he watches a little bit of TV and then goes to bed between 1 and 2 in the morning.
Detectives ask him if he heard anything that night, especially after what they had found at the crime scene.
We did locate a tire track and a footwear impression in Renee's driveway.
He denied hearing anything from Renee's house.
Mike tells police he didn't notice anything unusual the next morning either.
He woke up in the morning around 9 or 10 and then went to meet with his family to go see a bike race. Part of the problem with Mike Decker's alibi, even though he was cooperative through this process, he was on the property when this murder happened.
With no one to corroborate his alibi, police get a warrant to search Mike's apartment.
We seized his pipe from his sink because we wanted to see if there was any blood or trace evidence in there, and then we found a couple of large knives.
The evidence is rushed to the crime lab for analysis.
The knives and the pipe forensically did not show anything. There were no signs of blood.
We found no knives that matched the type of knife that was used.
But still, Mike cannot be ruled out. A week after the homicide, detectives interview him again, this time at the sheriff's office.
He showed no issues of concern of us looking at him as a potential suspect from gathering any type of physical evidence from him. We even offered him a polygraph, and Mr. Decker submitted to that also and passed without any deceit.
With nothing tying Mike Decker to the crime, investigators let him go. Searching for any further clues about Renee, detectives reach out to her parents once again, and in turn, get a lead on a new suspect, Renee's own sister, Michelle.
Renee's father stated that the relationship between Renee and Michelle was strained. He mentioned that Michelle was jealous of Renee's life, of what she had.
She wanted a successful career, a family, a home, all of those things.
Renee and Michelle's problems went beyond sibling rivalry.
During the divorce, Renee's attorney was able to subpoena the phone records of Michael Pagel, so he turned those over to Renee.
When she examined phone records, she learned that Mike and Michelle were talking frequently.
So she was extremely upset. She was very hurt by this.
There was such significant communication between Mike Pagel and the sister Michelle that it raised a red flag to us right away that there might be some sort of affair going on.
Renee told me how betrayed she felt by her sister. She really struggled with that.
During the interviews with numerous people, it was mentioned that Michelle potentially was having a relationship with Michael. Once I learned that, it's obviously somebody we wanted to look at.
Michelle is brought in for an interview. And though she says that she is saddened by her sister's death, her answers raise eyebrows with investigators.
She didn't speak very highly of Renee. She was not happy at all the way that Renee was handling the divorce.
Michelle clearly took Mike's side in it and kind of put her sister in the bad light. She felt that Mike was a good father, and it was her sister that was really trying to take advantage of him.
We did ask her if she was in a relationship or had a relationship with Michael, and she completely denied it.
Detectives asked Michelle where she was the night of the murder.
She said she was working into the evening, and that evening she was home with her roommate. Basically, she was stating that she was home the evening of the murder.
Michelle did take a polygraph, and she was found to be truthful and did not appear to have any involvement in the homicide.
With Michelle all but ruled out, investigators discovered that she isn't the only family member Renee had issues with.
When I spoke with Renee's parents, it was mentioned that Michael, her soon-to-be ex-husband, had a brother. The brother was Charles Pagel. They called him Bo. And they said that he was very strange, very odd.
He and Renee did not get along. Renee didn't like him. She didn't trust him.
When detectives dig deeper, they uncover something troubling.
We learned from a close friend of Renee that he had been married numerous times, and she believed that maybe Bo had murdered his last wife.
Was Bo a killer? And had he now killed again?
That obviously raised some red flags for us as investigators, and that's somebody we wanted to speak with very quickly.
Detectives investigating the vicious stabbing of Renee Pagel are looking at her estranged husband's brother, Bo Pagel.
Bo was married 3 times in the past, and one of his ex-wives died under suspicious circumstances.
One of Renee's friends gives a statement to police claiming that she believed Bo may have killed his ex-wife.
Obviously, what really sent us his way was the potential murder of his last wife, so that had our attention.
Detectives must determine if Bo could actually be a killer. They look deeper into his background.
Bo was a loner, lived at home with his mom. We learned that he was on-the-road trucker, and he traveled all over the country. He would be gone days at a time.
Investigators also look closer at Bo and Renee's fractured relationship.
There was clearly bad blood between him and Renee, dating back years, going back to the wedding.
We found out that Bo refused to be in the wedding. He was going to be the best man. He did not like her, thought she was not good for Mike, and he didn't approve of it whatsoever. He was outspoken to Michael about even marrying Renee.
And I think the relationship between Bo and Mike was really more of an estranged relationship for the 10 years that Mike and Renee were married.
But after Renee and Michael's separation, everything changed.
I do know that once Mike filed for divorce, he and Bo rekindled that relationship and became pretty close.
Bo was, I believe, happy that Renee was now out of the picture and he could have his brother back.
Could Bo have wanted Renee permanently out of Michael's life? Detectives bring him in for questioning.
So we interviewed Bo, and he denied any knowledge of the murder, denied any involvement.
Bo had said that through the week he was on the road trucking. He got home Thursday night.
Bo's alibi was that he was essentially across the state. He had driven a route the day of the homicide. He had gotten back around 6 o'clock and had gone out with some friends for dinner.
And then afterwards, he stated he went home, spoke to his daughter, and then went to bed.
And then the next morning got up and went canoeing with his daughter.
We contacted his work. We spoke to the family that he actually had dinner with that Friday evening to account for they were with him, what restaurant, until what time.
It pretty much matched up.
Though most of his story checks out, no one can confirm that Bo was at home at the time of Renee's murder. Needing more information, detectives reach out to Bo's daughter.
We confirmed with her that they went on the canoe trip in the morning.
Bo's daughter also puts to rest any suspicion that Bo was responsible for her mother's death.
She gave us details about her mother that we didn't know. She was a diabetic, she had some blood sugar problems, and she really didn't care for going to the doctor. So she didn't seek the medical help that she needed, and that ultimately is what resulted in her death.
She did not suspect Bo of doing anything.
Though Bo's alibi isn't ironclad, there is nothing concrete to link him to Renee's murder, and he is released. It's been 6 weeks since the homicide, and the investigation has ground to a halt.
The reason that we were stuck is because there was no physical evidence that would help tie any one person to this crime. We looked at every person. The estranged husband, his brother, Bo, Renee's sister, and Renee's tenant. And there was nothing to link them to this crime.
Police continue investigating for many months, but with no fresh leads, the case goes cold.
It just stalled. There was a point where I felt that we would never have a conclusion in this case.
It was just sad that we couldn't bring closure to Renee and to her family.
As the months went by, I was just like, what is going on?
Once the months turns into years, that was disheartening.
For 13 years, there are no new developments in the case. But through it all, Renee's best friend never gives up hope.
We created a website in the year 2007, and it was a really therapeutic way for people to come and grieve and share stories. And that website was very effective in getting the word out about Renee's murder, doing whatever it took to find justice for Renee.
In a stunning turn of events, on November 18th, 2019, Chris Crandall receives a surprising message on social media.
Mike's brother, Bo, sent me a friend request. And of course, I was very startled. And it was just after that I got a message from Bo. All of a sudden, after all these years, Bo wanted to talk.
13 years after Renee Pagel is viciously stabbed to death, her best friend receives a message from Renee's brother-in-law, Bo Pagel, wanting to talk.
And of course, I called the police and let them know that Bo had contacted me.
So we arranged to have the conversation between Chris and Bo recorded.
As a former suspect in Renee's murder, was Bo about to confess?
He called me clearly wanting to let it be known that Mike was losing it. Bo was afraid that he would be Mike's next victim. And I said to Bo, who do you think Mike's first victim was? And he danced around that and wouldn't answer it.
And Bo said, I believe Mike will kill me.
And it was then that I was entertaining the idea that Mike was not so innocent.
I listened to that conversation and was very concerned. Bo believes Mike's capable of killing somebody. We felt this was a big break. We now knew that Bo may have information about whether or not Mike did commit the murder.
On February 3rd, 2020, 2 months after his conversation with Chris Crandall, police formally interview Bo.
I just asked him to tell us what he knew about anybody being involved in Renee's murder, and he quickly told us that Mike Pagel was responsible for Renee's murder.
It's a stunning revelation.
It was the break we were looking for. It was the big piece of information that we needed.
Knowing this is their chance to finally solve Renee's murder, police get an official statement from Bo.
Bo laid out the story for us. Back in 2011, Bo and Mike decided to go out. Mike grabbed a six-pack of beer, and they just drove around and talked as brothers. And they stopped over the top of one bridge over a small river, and in the midst of that conversation, Mike produced a bag, and inside the bag was a knife that was wrapped in a cloth, and Mike made the comment to Bo of, "This is how I finalized my divorce," which was a complete shock to Bo. And it immediately made Bo angry. He said, "I believed you for all these years, we've supported you, and come to find out you're the one responsible. I can't believe you would have done that." And I think this made Mike angry. He expected Bo to congratulate him. So the way Bo described it was out of frustration. Mike took the knife and threw it into the river. Bo described it as about a 12-inch long, bigger knife, and it appeared to be a very strong, sturdy knife.
Investigators get Bo to show them exactly where Michael had thrown the knife.
There was quite a bit of old metal, various pieces of cars and other things inside the river, and in my opinion, that wasn't a safe diving environment. We had to find another means to search the bottom of the river.
Police wonder if they will be able to recover a knife that has been in the water for 9 years. Then, one of the detectives comes up with an idea.
It's called a rare earth magnet. The magnet is something that I've had at home, and it just came to mind as an option for a way to search the watery area and to grab whatever metal pieces were on the bottom of the river.
It was tremendously impressive for him to come up with his own homemade magnet device. And, you know, he concocted his own fishing line and pulling it through the stream, which is remarkable.
Police spend 3 days painstakingly dragging the riverbed with no success.
So we were on our last few passes of the river, and I began pulling toward my side, and then it was, "You're not gonna believe this," just disbelief. The knife was stuck to the magnet, and it was exactly as Bo described.
It was late in the day, I want to say 3 or 4 o'clock, and got the phone call. He got the knife. I'm like, no, are you kidding me? He got the knife, no.
And this is the magnet and the knife exactly as we found it.
It was awesome. It was everything you could hope for when you're investigating a case, to get that piece of evidence that you know you need, that you really weren't sure if it was going to be there, but there it is.
Police now need to confirm if the knife found matches the knife used in Renee Pagel's murder.
We brought it down to the medical examiner's office. They viewed it and instantly said, absolutely. It's consistent with the injuries that are on Renee's body. We were very confident we had the murder weapon.
Unbelievable. We've never had a a break like this, we got the needle in the haystack by finding the knife, and now we had a murder weapon that backed up what a witness said.
It allowed us to validate Bo's statement that that knife was thrown in that water by Mike Pagel.
On February 6th, 2020, 13 years after Renee's death, Michael Pagel is officially charged with her murder.
So this case was going to hinge a lot on the testimony of Bo, but it's still circumstantial evidence. And is the jury going to believe him or not?
In the midst of that, the defense attorneys asked if we would consider a plea offer. When someone asks for a plea, it usually means that they're willing to tell the truth. And in this case, that was one of the conditions, is we wanted to hear the truth as part of the plea agreement.
The prosecution agrees to a plea deal of second-degree murder and a minimum of 25 years in prison.
We wanted to get a term of years to make sure he was old enough that he would never harm anyone again.
On May 20th, 2020, 55-year-old Michael Pagel agrees to plead guilty to second-degree murder, avoiding a trial by jury. But at his plea hearing, Michael suddenly turns the case on its head.
It was unbelievable. And I just remember being sick to my stomach.
After 13 years of investigating the heinous murder of Renee Pagel, her estranged husband is finally being charged for the brutal crime. But at his plea hearing, Michael makes an admission that takes everyone by surprise.
I hired my brother, Charles Pagel, to kill Renee Pagel. Charles Pagel murdered Renee Pagel.
We were all absolutely shocked when he said that his brother did this.
Mike maintained the fact that Bo was the one responsible. He admitted that he had orchestrated it and that he had planned it, but insisted that Bo was the one that actually did the stabbing, which was a complete shock to us. We had investigated and we found no evidence, nothing to directly tie Bo Pagel to this murder.
Had Bo been hiding his involvement all along? While detectives take another look at him, they also dig for more evidence against Michael. And after several searches of his home, they make a surprising discovery.
At Mike's house, we found the ceiling had a hidden compartment. When we took this down, we found 3 hard drives in this hidden compartment.
Investigators spend time decoding the contents of Michael's hard drives, and what they find is chilling.
In those hard drives, there was journaling.
I would call it strange. It appeared to be written by almost 2 different personalities, one that would talk back and forth to the other.
He talked about planning to divorce, how much he hated her.
There was a lot of writings about his dislike and his hatred for Renee.
Then, weeks later, police tracked down a crucial witness.
We uncovered a friend who had said that he had gifted a knife to Michael that was substantially similar to the one that was actually found.
And he admitted that he gave it to Mike as a gift, and it was delivered directly to Mike Pagel. So that helped us put the knife in Mike's hands.
So now you have a knife that was found in the river that now a friend is saying had given to Michael and not to Bo.
While the evidence is circumstantial, police believe it strengthens their case even further against Michael.
There was nothing that could back up Michael's story in terms of physical evidence, any other witnesses, anything else other than his word about it. Whereas Bo at least had stuff to back it up. His alibi backed up, and the physical evidence that he provided backed it up. So there's just absolutely nothing that shows that Bo did this. This was Michael Pagel. This was all him that committed this murder that night.
Investigators conclude what likely happened on the night of Renee's murder.
When the children were sleeping, he snuck out of his house, and he went over to Renee's.
It's pretty well known that she donated a kidney.
Obviously, she wasn't strong at this point.
She was asleep in bed, and he walked in with that knife and brutally stabbed her.
I believe that Mike no doubt planned this out.
There's no way you leave a crime scene that clean and it's not carefully planned. How he absolutely didn't leave a blood drop, a fingerprint, a mark, any physical evidence.
Bo tells us about Mike commenting that he had worn coveralls and galoshes. So he had taken precaution to not get his clothes bloody, and that he had removed those items and then put them in a garbage bag and left. And that the clothes were later burned.
He's not a stupid man. He knew enough to cover his tracks. He went in there purposely. He had an intent, he had a purpose, and he went in there to kill her, and he did.
There was anger involved in this crime. This was evil.
But why would Michael kill Renee?
I believe Mike Pagel was very upset with the way the divorce was proceeding, that he didn't get sole custody of the children, that he didn't get the family home. Things just weren't going his way.
He's got motive, and if anybody's got rage, it's the about-to-be ex-husband who's not getting what he wanted.
I think that the writing was on the wall for him that this was the end.
On October 5th, 2020, Michael Pagel is sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison.
I never thought it would take 14 years to bring justice to Renee and to her family. But, you know, you always had in the back of your mind that justice would be served.
It was incredible exhilaration, and I do believe that the information that
The triumph that wasn't.
We thought we were going to die for a little while.
We're there as passengers finally disembark early this morning. Stranded for days. Garbage and toilets backed up. Forced to sleep in tents on the poop deck.
5 days, one flush.
No electricity, no air conditioning, and not enough answers.
Clearly, we failed.
So tonight, we try to ask the tough questions.
I wonder if you could take a few more questions, like, do you really?
What keeps happening on these ships, and who should pay? High and dry. Plus, the Costa Concordia, a year later, still dead in the water, while victims try to rebuild their lives and recover their loved ones still missing.
You just can't take a pill and get over it.
And whatever happened to the so-called chicken of the sea? The captain who went MIA when the lights went out.
There were no women and children first. Ladies, you're on your own.
Ghost ship and cruise ship confidential. What's really going on in the cabin next door? What do staff insiders say?
All the action is below the waterline. The average crew deck makes a sorority house look like a nunnery.
The secret underground of sex and liquor below deck.
If there's an empty cabin, that'll be the cabin where everybody goes to have sex.
What happens when you're trapped by rough seas, rough passengers, and even rougher germs? Troubled waters. Here now, David Muir.
Good evening. And so many families, so many couples just getting home tonight after days trapped at sea on that Carnival cruise ship, Triumph. The real triumph, though, those passengers simply getting through it all. The so-called cruise from hell finally docking in Alabama. 5 days after a terrifying engine fire knocked out power and turned that ship into what some called a floating petri dish. There was suffering, fortunately not the casualties of last year's Costa Concordia, but all of it does raise serious questions. And so tonight here, we put a microscope on the industry as a whole. Why was an ultimate rescue so late in coming? And were the apologies too little, too late? Matt Gutman, on this from the start, was on that dock getting answers.
The thousands of stranded passengers knew their ordeal was finally over. And this morning, they came pouring out of the crippled ship. It was an untriumphant return.
We get to go home.
Standing on and in some cases kissing terra firma for the first time in 8 days.
You can talk to us. Come on over. I'm speechless. It's just really great to finally be back in America and on land.
Some angry.
The doctor on the staff can, excuse my French, he can kiss my.
It was the worst experience I've ever had. We thought we were going to die for a little while.
Others relieved.
I'm just happy to be alive. It's quite an ordeal, but we're here.
They ran, many wearing bathrobes against the cold, to plant kisses on loved ones, holding on to each other. By the hundreds, they were stuffed onto buses before they could even shower or even change their gritty clothes. Among the first out, Stephanie Stevenson and Rob Mallum. Not just your regular cruisers, they were headed for the tropics for a reason, a romantic wedding at sea. He's in a tie, she's in white. But marital bliss would turn into maritime nightmare early on Sunday morning, 3 days into the cruise.
Looked over the side rail and you could see the just billows and billows of smoke coming out of the top of the stack.
Were you scared?
I was pretty freaked out.
A fire had erupted in the engine room and some passengers go into Titanic mode.
They said Alpha Team to the engine room.
Attention, code Alpha engine room.
People take it upon themselves to strap on life jackets and scramble towards the lifeboats.
I saw the smoke. I knew good and well there was a good chance the ship would be sinking.
The fire had burned out the ship's main engines. The sparkling city on the sea, known as the fun ship you see in these carnival ads, was now not much more than a 100,000-ton cork bobbing in the Gulf of Mexico. The electricity cuts out. Everything goes dark. Carly Jackson and Jody Adelhauser are jazzercise instructors from Paris, Texas.
All the power shut off at like once, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Titanic.
The lower decks fill with smoke, engulfing some of the cafeterias. They even see it billowing from the stack.
The smoke has gotten worse.
Then the air conditioning goes out. Still, the crew assures the passengers that everything is under control.
Nothing to worry about, folks. You can wait up on the Lido deck. It's really lovely out there.
An automated system extinguishes the fire, but the ship stays dead in the water. By Monday, 24 hours after the crisis began, Carnival decided to tow the ship not to nearby Mexico, but to Mobile, Alabama, because not everybody had passports with them. That added nearly 350 miles and an extra day of hardship for passengers.
I'm not liking that.
By this time, 2 other Carnival cruise ships had been diverted to deliver food and water to the hobbled vessel. Helicopters were also deployed carrying generators and other supplies on Wednesday.
They came and dropped off water and stuff, but that didn't stop babies from going hungry. That didn't stop other people from hoarding food.
Wow. But despite their efforts, conditions aboard the Triumph were deteriorating fast. No electricity, not enough running water, and almost no cell phone service, leaving parents and loved ones on land frantic.
I just need to know that she's okay.
The ship, 300 yards long, equipped with every amenity, and now the more than 4,000 aboard could only communicate in snippets of text messages.
We're in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
36 hours into the crisis, no hot food, no hot water, no AC, and the ship was listing.
When we were leaning one way, it was kind of a little nerve-wracking.
Worst of all, backed up toilets. There was sewage everywhere.
We got one flush, one time.
5 days, one flush.
5 days, one flush.
For toilets, the ship handed out these red bags.
People were using the restroom in little red plastic bags and throwing them out into the hallway.
We were in shock. We were like, I'm not using a red bag.
The thing is you just don't eat. You just don't eat.
To not have to use the red bag, you
controlling the colon. You just don't eat.
We met a couple that we were talking to that said her husband was laying in bed and just the ceiling fell down on him full of
urine, feces, all of that.
Yeah.
The stench and heat driving people to camp out on the decks. They built tent cities out of bed sheets.
We've been shipwrecked for, I guess, 3 days now.
ABC News was the first to fly out over the ship on Wednesday. You can tell how powerful the wind is, gusting at 25 miles an hour. Those conditions bringing out the worst in some people.
They opened the bar one evening and gave away free drinks, and that was a really bad idea. There were people throwing things over the side of the ship, acting unruly.
And during the voyage, passengers did receive updates on the PA system as well as printed status updates But Rob Mallon thinks that was another poor decision.
Somehow they managed to print us out little letters that they sent to our room.
Maybe they were using the emergency generator to supply printers instead of toilets.
Yes.
Folks hoarding food, forcing others onto a diet of onion sandwiches.
What was the food situation like?
You had to stand in line for 3 hours to get a meal. And the first couple days it was the onion sandwiches.
But at least they were steadily, if slowly, being tugged back to the U.S. That's when Mike Padilla finally got through to his wife on the phone, anxiously waiting her return.
They think the tug line might have just broken.
Passengers say this should never have happened. Just last week, Carnival admitted that there was an electrical problem on the Triumph's previous voyage, but said there is no evidence at this time of any relationship between this previous issue and the fire that occurred on February 10th. This is the latest in a string of incidents involving cruise ships. Last year, the Costa Concordia capsized in Italy, killing 32 passengers. And in 2010, another Carnival ship, the Splendor, was stranded for days after another engine fire. Unlike the airline industry, there's no agency regulating the safety operations of cruise lines. Jim Walker is a maritime lawyer.
And unlike our U.S. aviation, commercial aviation fleet in the States that has the FAA that can oversee the industry and actually shut a fleet down if there's safety violations, there's no one looking out for the safety of passengers on ships relative to fires.
A spokesman for the cruise industry denies there's no regulation.
I know you can't talk to me, but is there anybody who can?
For 3 days, not a single Carnival exec appeared publicly until CEO Jerry Cahill spoke late Tuesday.
We pride ourselves in providing our guests with a great vacation experience, and clearly we failed in this particular case.
Carnival has offered the passengers a full refund, a voucher for another cruise, and $500, and it will cover travel expenses.
Oh my God, it's degrading, demoralizing. And then they want to insult us by giving us $500.
Since Sunday, ABC News has been requesting answers to questions about the ship's history of mechanical problems. No answer. They did hold 3 press conferences, but answered very few questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton. Matt Gutman from ABC News. Thank you for taking the time today. But I wonder if you could take a few more questions, like, do you really? You're running away.
We've been trying to track down anybody from Carnival to talk to us. And the company's chief marketing officer, he also retreated.
We're on our way.
2 minutes.
But one thing that did go right in the end for Carnival was bringing that colossus of a ship up this narrow channel in darkness. And after 8 days at sea, the most precious of cargo delivered back to family members.
You guys gonna sleep tonight?
I'm gonna shower.
We're showering. We had our food, now just a long shower, long hot shower.
I really want to get home though.
And for the newlyweds, a delayed wedding banquet of burgers and fries.
This is going to be the best hamburger ever.
Never was there a couple so happy to trade a cruise for a bus.
When we got on the bus, we went back and we flushed the toilet just to make sure it worked.
And 2 other notes tonight. It's your tax dollars that help pay the price of these rescues by the Coast Guard, leading some to ask tonight, should the cruise lines be paying more? And as for size, the Carnival Corporation owns nearly half the industry, 10 brands, 100 ships worldwide. The industry is still growing. ABC's own parent company, Disney, has 4 ships of its own. We'll be right back.
Next, the Costa Concordia, more than a year later, still stuck on its side. The images we can't forget, and survivors still reliving the nightmare.
I haven't slept one good night since.
My girls have had nightmares.
And what about the captain who abandoned ship?
We have children, we have babies, and he's the first person off the ship.
But get this, he's suing to get his old job back. Coming up.
This nightmare for Carnival passengers comes just over a year since the Costa Concordia became the largest passenger ship ever to capsize. That accident, of course, turning deadly. Some 4,200 people on board rescued in those waters. Tonight here, we're back on the scene. Why is the ship still lying on its side all these months later? And have we learned anything to make passengers safer? Dan Harris went back to Italy to find out.
It was one of the largest, costliest, and arguably most infamous cruise ship disasters since the Titanic.
Get the kids, go.
The Costa Concordia, a 15-story luxury liner which ran aground off the coast of Italy on Friday the 13th of January 2012, killing 32 people. But in the last 13 months, as the story has faded from the headlines, what has happened to the man they called Captain Coward, blamed for causing the crash and abandoning ship? To the passengers who barely escaped? And what about the massive ship itself? We took a journey to find out. On a ferry off the coast of Tuscany, an hour into our voyage, it came looming into sight.
That is extraordinary.
A 60,000-ton behemoth beached in pristine, environmentally sensitive waters.
More than a year after the Costa Concordia went down, here it is. It's still here, surrounded by cranes and other vessels, which are involved in an extraordinary, expensive, risky, and unprecedented salvage operation. The plan is deceptively simple: to turn this hulking mass of steel upright and simply float it away.
It is an audacious plan. They are welding a series of enormous buoyancy tanks to one side of the boat, which will be used to rotate it upright. It will land, they hope, on an enormous steel bed and then be floated to the surface and towed away to a scrapyard. It could cost more than $500 million, and it might not even work. It is a far cry from the ship's heyday. Before she was rusting and rotting, she was a glittery showpiece with more than 18 restaurants and bars. Her captain, a made-for-TV villain named Francesco Scatino, who favors dark suits, sunglasses, and slick-back hair, and who, in the dark of night, 3 hours into a 10-day cruise, decided to attempt a risky maneuver, taking the ship off course to give a sail-by salute to honor a fellow captain who lived on the tiny island of Giglio. But the ship came too close and hit an underwater rock. For an hour, as panic set in, the crew told the 3,200 passengers to return to their cabins, that it was just a minor technical problem. By the time Captain Scatino got around to issuing the abandoned ship order, the vessel was in chaos, with people pushing one another to get onto the lifeboats, and some of them jumping to their deaths. Lynn Kalin from Seattle documented the confusion.
Because we were literally in pitch black on this huge ship, and no one had any directions whatsoever. It was total chaos.
Members of the Ananias family from California were among the last off the ship.
We knew that this was the end for us.
We told our daughters that, go ahead, our life, we've
Save
lived, save yourselves. And they told us, no, we go as a family.
Meanwhile, Captain Scatino was long gone. He later said he tripped and fell into a lifeboat. A Coast Guard official was recorded screaming at the captain to go back and help. Damn it, he said, go back on board. There were heroes that night, including the people of Giglio Island.
On that terrible night, many of the passengers and crew jumped into these frigid waters and swam over to these rocks, where they were tended to by complete strangers who live in this little port village.
The mayor, Sergio Ortelli, made an extraordinary decision.
You ordered people to open up their homes and businesses to the survivors. Why did you do that?
Some of them were soaking wet and frightened. Many of them were elderly, he said, and many of them children. Giuseppe Modesti still cries when he recalls the night when the town opened its arms to the wet and the wounded.
It's tough for you to talk about, emotional.
My mind goes back to that night, he said, and the emotions from those days return. In the immediate aftermath, the island was flooded with family members like Kevin Rebello, who we met as he was looking for his brother Russell, a waiter on the Concordia.
My instinct says he's somewhere around. I hope he's alive.
4 weeks ago, Giglio once again hosted survivors and victims' family members for the one-year anniversary. Kevin Rebello was there, his brother still missing and now counted as one of the dead.
For us, it's very important to have a body to take him home. For me and for my family, it's very important.
There was a procession and later a minute of silence at the exact moment, 9:45 p.m., when the Concordia ran aground. 32 lanterns carrying messages for those who did not survive.
There's still a lot of not understanding why we survived and other people didn't. And that is something that's very, very hard to live with.
This week, we caught up again with Lynn Kalin, who captured those haunting images from the Costa Concordia. She says watching this latest cruise ship crisis unfold in the Gulf brings it all back for her.
It brings back the memories of the night when we literally went over on the cruise ship. I feel so sorry for those people because I know what it's like being stuck on a cruise ship and not being able to get off.
One of the major ongoing frustrations for the survivors, lawsuits against Carnival Cruise Lines, which owns the Costa Concordia, are unlikely to go far. Maritime law is not generous to victims of disasters. The most you can probably collect for wrongful death or severe injury, roughly 60 grand. Lynn Kalin collected just over $9,000.
It definitely doesn't cover the stress in our going to psychiatrists and things like that, and all of our belongings on the ship, and we're still living with it.
I haven't slept one good night since the accident.
My girls have had nightmares. One of them is saying that she's at an angle, like at a tilt, constantly in the dream.
So what has become of the man who is allegedly to blame for this accident? Captain Scatino is at his home near Naples under court orders. Since the crash, he's been publicly defending his actions.
Lei non crede di aver commesso un crimine?
Assolutamente no.
Calling himself a hero, blaming his subordinates, and saying he has no regrets.
Io rifarei quello che ho fatto, visto?
And here's the kicker. He is now suing the cruise company to get his job back.
Io ho fiducia in tutte le persone che stai guidando questo caso.
Lei si sentirebbe ritornare su una nave da crociera, comandante?
Certamente sì.
That comment drives Lynn Kalin up a wall.
I don't understand how someone that has done what he has done could even consider him working for the industry ever again.
Get the kids, go, go.
He didn't know what was going on with us. We have children, you have babies, and he's the first person off the ship. Where was his compassion for us?
In weeks, a judge is expected to announce whether there's enough evidence to indict Scatino on manslaughter, causing a wreck, and abandoning ship. The man they call the Chicken of the Sea may be looking at life behind bars. Meanwhile, after a series of delays, salvage crews hope to be able to remove the Costa Concordia from her watery resting place this September. For those whose family members died, however, the losses will remain incalculable.
In the months after the Costa Concordia disaster, the cruise industry facing a huge image problem. New bookings dropped, cancellations skyrocketed, and Carnival and other cruise line operators had to cut their rates to attract new passengers. Many asking tonight, will the same thing happen now after the Triumph? We'll be right back.
Next, when going overboard with your partying turns into overboard, period.
How in the hell did I get here?
Falling 10 stories into the pitch black and left behind in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico when 2020 continues. 2020 returns. Man Overboard, now with John Quinones.
No! There's a man overboard.
Straight ahead! Straight ahead! He's yelling straight ahead.
As a rescue boat searches the dark sea.
He's way out there. You can hear him.
Moments later.
He's laying right there.
A man, after floating for 3 hours, is pulled from the water alive. They're more than just cruise ships. They're floating cities. But no one fears falling off a city. The same can't be said for these colossal vessels. The numbers are foggy, but some estimate that every 2 weeks someone goes overboard. 23 known cases last year. Most simply vanished. Only one was found dead, and 4 lived to tell their story. Passengers like Tim Sears.
Last thing I remember is looking for my friend in the casino.
It's 2003, aboard Carnival's Celebration cruise ship. As in many of these cases, Tim Sears, then 31, had too much to drink. That's the last detail he remembers before falling 10 stories into the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles offshore.
I'm coming to in the middle of the water, and there's no ship around, and it's total darkness.
Pitch black in the middle of the ocean. Tim asks himself,
how in the hell did I get here? I mean, to be honest with you, that was my very first thought, was how in the world did I end up here in the middle of the water with no ship around?
He can see next to nothing.
A few varying lights way off in the distance, and that's about it. Fairly quickly, I realized I didn't have any pants, any shoes. All I had on was boxers and a sweatshirt and a t-shirt on.
No one knows Tim is missing, but he's not alone.
I can actually remember looking around and seeing just little green, bluish, small creatures jump around, and that's all I could see for miles. And I just remember stopping and actually going, wow, this is amazing.
Tim's psychedelic friends are just bioluminescent algae. For 14 hours in shark-infested waters, Tim, a former Army paratrooper, manages to stay afloat until his mind and body say enough.
I was tired, and so I made peace with God and closed my eyes and started going down in the water, taking water in through my nose into my lungs, and no thoughts went through my head. I was ready for it to be over.
Tim says he starts to sink into the darkness, but then something happens, a light of hope that gives him a renewed determination.
And my eyes just opened, and I swam back to the top, spit the water out, and decided that I was going to keep swimming.
For 3 hours, Tim struggles on. Like Tom Hanks in Castaway, he's still slowly drifting into the abyss until, in a scene straight from the movie, Tim, too, sees what he thinks is a ship on the horizon.
The waves were just enormous. Up and down. I had lost my glasses, of course. I couldn't see.
With every primal instinct to survive, Tim swims toward the boat, screaming for help. After 17 hours, a cargo ship headed for Texas plucks him out of the water.
I was asking God to send me any ship, and here any ship had rescued me. And it brought me to tears.
Cruising is very safe. It's highly unusual for a passenger to just fall overboard.
Statistically, cruising is safer than walking across the street.
That seems like it's pretty good odds, but it's not to the families that are left without their loved one.
13 years ago, Gene Scavone's son, Jimmy, was lost at sea on a Carnival cruise in the Caribbean. Since then, she's been linking families that have lost loved ones.
It's like a family, a group of us now that have this experience, and we have no answers. No one should vanish from a cruise ship. No one should leave on a vacation on a cruise ship and never come back.
There have been well-known cases of the vanished. In 2005, George Smith, the honeymooner who disappeared on a cruise, leaving behind a pool of dried blood. His family's convinced he was murdered. His body never found. Other stories of suspected foul play have received fewer headlines. Annette Meisner went on a cruise to Mexico with her parents and daughter. One evening, they discovered she was missing. The ship's crew paged her name.
When we heard that page, I knew something was wrong. My heart just fell. I panicked.
On the ship's third deck, their daughter's purse and overturned drink were found next to the railing. The ship was searched from top to bottom, and eventually the Coast Guard was called in.
It covered 833 square miles, and they did not find the body.
Meisner's disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Her family reached an out-of-court confidential settlement with Carnival Cruise Lines. But for her family, there will never be closure, only the bitter memory of what was lost at sea.
Very difficult. You go on vacation with 4 people and you come back with 3.
While there are happy endings like Tim Sears, the tragic tales continue to take victims. 3.5 years ago, Annette's father, Wally, died from what his wife called a broken heart.
Next, think you're having fun on a vacation cruise upstairs? Wait till you hear what the crew can get up to downstairs.
Is there a lot of partying that goes on even amongst the crew members?
Amongst the crew members, that's where the party is.
The crew spills the beans. Cruise Ship Confidential, coming up. As we continue, the secret life below deck. Here's Deborah Roberts.
For millions, cruises are about sunsets, swimming, soaking up the good life. But let's face it, for many, hitting the high seas is also about hitting the hard stuff. Ever hear the expression cruise ship drunk? Well, you're looking at it. YouTube is plastered with evidence of cruise passengers gone wild. Seems there's something about being at sea that brings out the crazy in people. You might even lose your fear of heights. And it's not just passengers partying it up. Beneath the pools, the bistros, the bars, down past the sun deck and through these doors is a world few cruisers ever see. Unless you turn to YouTube, where cruise ship employees have posted a clear glimpse of life below the deck. This man saw it all.
All the action is below the waterline, all of it.
Brian David Bruns worked as a waiter aboard cruise ships until 2005, dishing about his adventures in his 3 books.
Is there a lot of partying that goes on even amongst the crew members?
Amongst the crew members, that's where the party is. The amount of alcohol and sex that's going on down there, it's paramount. The average crew deck makes a sorority house look like a nunnery. I'm not kidding.
I'm on a boat and it's going fast and I got
It's plain to see on these crew videos, young people from all around the world spending months at sea, working and playing aboard these floating cities. There are regular crew parties, bars designated just for the staff.
It's a big free-for-all. That's all it is.
Sherry Cecil worked on a luxury cruise liner in 2004, climbing the ladder from waitress to officer.
There's sex cabins if there's an empty cabin, and they can somehow sneak a passkey. That'll be the cabin where everybody goes to have sex.
All of it happening, she says, under the passengers' noses. While cruisers stroll the luxurious decks and enjoy beautiful cabins, on the lower floors, often below the waterline, is the crew deck. It's like a separate ship with dining areas, rec rooms, and tiny cabins housing at least 2 to a room.
The cabin is the size of a walk-in closet.
And within this little society at sea, a strict hierarchy all its own.
Is it kind of a sense of like upstairs, downstairs, you know, sort of a feeling of you're working here, they're working there, and you don't mingle?
Yes, and it's not just a feeling, it's physical as well. Staff officers, all those guys are up on the bridge decks. They never go down below the waterline. They don't even go to the crew decks if they can help it.
Unless there's a reason.
A lot of my friends in the restaurants were pretty ladies. They always had an officer that was asking them to be their ship squeeze. That's what it's called, ship squeeze. We all have one, right? And they have wives and kids back home.
When the wives come on in the families, the mistresses are put offshore for a week's vacation, and the wives leave, and on the mistresses they come back.
But it's a tougher life for crew members who say days are filled with back-breaking chores.
You work constantly. I don't want to call it a sweatshop condition, but that's really what it is. So you work 80 hours a week minimum.
80 hours a week?
I worked 15 weeks in a row at 100 hours a week. They're paying you something like $40 a month. Almost 100% of their salary come from tips from the guests. Between $1,000, maybe $3,000 on the high end a month.
Human rights groups have accused cruise lines of exploiting workers with long hours and low pay. The cruise industry says it's a problem of the past and new laws will regulate working and rest hours. Yet former employee Cecil says passengers have been deliberately kept in the dark about anything negative.
We don't tell them anything. If there's a mechanical breakdown, we do not tell them. If there is an illness outbreak, we do not tell them. We are told to lie to them.
Sherry's personal cruise story is frightening. Just 2 months into her contract after a night of drinking, she says a fellow crew member raped her in her cabin. The trauma of the attack was horrifying enough, she says. Then she told her superiors.
And my boss hauled me into his office and said, Sherry, bad things happen to good people. You just have to put this beside you. You're just going to have to get on with your life, get over it, and get back to work. So either you show up tonight at work or you go pack your bags. I had already been raped. Was I going to lose my career?
Sherry continued working. 2 years later, she left the ship, sued the cruise line, and settled for an undisclosed amount.
They shoot first, ask questions later. If there's even a whiff of controversy, you're gone. You get pregnant, you're gone. They very much sweep it under the rug.
Still, Brian says the good outweighs the bad. He and others we talked with insist that cruise work is mostly free of serious trouble or controversy.
Would you take a cruise today?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to take a cruise. Bring it. Bring it. I'm ready. Get
much of imagination with what you would expect here in the United States.
I don't think that's true anymore. There certainly may have been a time where cruise lines hired retired doctors or doctors that really didn't want to work very hard. I think those days are over.
Oliver DiPietro spent more than a decade as a cruise ship doctor, as well as managing medical care for Norwegian cruise lines. I spoke with him from his office in Miami.
Basically, people spend a lot of time researching the ports of call and the onboard activities. Nobody's checking in to see who the doctors are.
Well, I think that the cruise lines do that before they hire a ship's doctor. Most doctors today are, doctors that have emergency room experience and training. Same with the nurses.
But no matter how qualified the doctors, if something happens like it did on the Triumph,
the smell, the sewage, coming out of the bathroom, the toilets wasn't flushing.
It's trouble.
It's their worst nightmare. It's actually an unbelievably significant event. You have no hygiene.
Urine floating on the floor, feces coming down the wall.
No running water.
This is the bags that we were told to use the restroom in.
They're not able to even clean up after themselves.
Dr. Philip Tierno of NYU is an expert on microbiology and germs and says confined spaces can always breed disease. Infectious disease outbreaks are not uncommon. The CDC reported 16 stomach flu outbreaks on U.S. ships alone just last year.
An outbreak of a highly contagious stomach virus on board the Queen Mary 2.
The bottom line, in a situation like the Triumph,
it was the worst experience I've ever had.
There are limits to what any doctor can do.
Ship's medical departments are very well equipped.
But it sounds like, you're basically there to stabilize the patient until you can get them more sophisticated medical help, right?
Correct. You would not do surgery on board. You would evacuate.
But getting to the hospital fast is only possible if you're close enough for a Coast Guard helicopter to reach, like a man with a life-threatening condition was just over a year ago. Of course, after you land, you may want pain medication when you get the bill, as much as tens of thousands of dollars for that Coast Guard flight. But a ship at sea presents all kinds of potential hazards, and being trapped on board, particularly in bad weather, can be much worse than no bathrooms. Imagine the terror on board the Oceanos. It went down off South Africa in 1991. Fortunately, everyone was rescued. 30-foot rogue waves hit this cruise ship near Spain in 2010, smashing through windows, a direct hit on unsuspecting diners. The terrifying wave killed 2 and left 14 others injured. And look what happened on this ship during a bad storm off New Zealand in 2008. Everything that wasn't nailed down slides around or out of control. 42 people were hurt, many with broken bones. In these worst-case scenarios, people's lives may depend on their own reactions. And researchers say most of us, 80% of us, will freeze.
The vast majority of people do this. It's called denial, in essence, right?
There's a lot going on in your brain in this moment. And most of all, your brain is going to rely on its hardwired response to fear.
Writer Amanda Ripley has studied our reactions to plane crashes, sinking ferries, and burning buildings.
I think the thing that's most surprising is that your biggest threat is that you will move too slowly or shut down altogether.
That is, until others step in to lead the way. About 10% of us will take that role. On the Concordia, those take-charge types led others to safety. As for the final 10%, they completely freak out and are far less likely to survive a disaster. Cruise ships have stepped up their safety precautions and evacuation drills to ensure people are aware of what to do.
We train them what they would do in an actual emergency. We practice in the way that they might actually be expected to act and the crew would act in an emergency.
Still, passengers seem relatively unfazed. The cruise lines are confident people will sail on, anticipating nothing but happy memories.
We want both new customers and old customers to know that as a guest on our ships, they will be safe and secure.
And that is our program for tonight. I'm David.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
It was a violent, frenzied and very, very aggressive attack. It almost severed his head.
If members of the public have any information at all, this was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time.
It's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible what could happen here.
This was the biggest manhunt.
From the instant I saw him, I realised he didn't fit in. I do regret not following him to see where he went.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
East Harling, a quaint village nestled in the heart of the South Norfolk countryside.
It's a lovely little place to live in. It's really quiet, but it's got a lot of sense of community, a lot of pockets of very different helpful people, sports, and there's a couple of pubs.
Really nice place to live, safe place really. You know, everyone a lot of people know each other around here.
With its bountiful forests and country walks to enjoy a quieter pace of life, Harling and its neighbouring villages are the perfect places for many to set up home.
People usually say hello to you and you can stop and have a conversation. A lot of dog walkers in the area, of which I'm one. And, you know, they definitely always speak, pass the time of day with you.
Harling Heath, a really, really nice place to walk, and we use it for biking, running and dog walking.
The heathlands on the edge of the villages has long been a draw for dog walkers. But this idyllic setting was shattered early one morning when a body was discovered in brambles on the heath.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
He was found by a couple that were walking their dogs. They saw his dogs walking without anyone, and then as they approached the scene, they could see some blood on the ground and his body partly covered by some brambles just off the pathway. The police were called.
I just remember it was a Saturday, I was at home, and I just remember hearing these police sirens screaming through the village.
I didn't actually come till the afternoon and arrived here. So all these police cars all these police cars around for us, but it's quite bizarre.
Rumours about the discovery of a body in undergrowth fly through the villages.
An initial assessment suggested that he may have been subject to an animal attack.
One early theory was an attack from an animal, and that was mainly led from the extent of the injuries. Obviously, there's Banham Zoo, not a huge distance away.
I was very sceptical of that because we know what's in the woods, and I can't think of a wild animal that had been over there to do such damage, to kill somebody. There isn't animals over there to do that.
The news spreads among the local dog walking community. Could a wild animal really have attacked and killed a man on their doorstep?
There was a sense of fear, but that kind of not really believing it was going on in the village.
I think it was a bit of a shock to everybody. And it's not something that happens in this area. It certainly put us off walking our dogs there for a while. I had a young daughter at the time, she was only 3, and I wasn't keen on taking her there, you know.
Rookie journalist Zach Ward was one of the first to get wind of the story.
So at the time, I felt shocked, I felt surprised. This was my first job in journalism. It was our goal to try and handle it sensitively. The stories we normally covered at This Express were very community-based, they were human interest. It was about council tax going up. It was people's 100th birthdays. It was that level of local news. So when we say things like this don't happen, that's not a cliche, it's genuine. We had really very little experience in covering this major event.
Police finally identify the body in the woods as 83-year-old Peter Wrighton. But who is he?
Mr. Wrighton was retired. He lived with his wife. He had 2 dogs, one 13 and one 9 or 10 years old, that he walked regularly.
He had retired to Banham, which is about 5 miles as the crow flies to East Harling. He'd worked for BT for 35 years. He'd been married for 59 years, and he sounded like a gentle, kind, loving man. Loved his dogs. He was walking with Gemma and Dylan at the time, and they both stayed with the body, which I think that tells you the bond between dog and owner. He sounded like a really well-respected member of the community, and we got an outpouring of tributes and sympathy once his name had been released.
The first time we moved in, we went and introduced ourselves to the neighbours. Peter and Anne were very, very welcoming. One of our first things to do was to invite them over for a meal.
They were always friendly. You'd go over there, they're always welcome to. And obviously they used to take their dogs out for a walk, both of them. And they loved dogs, so they took in a lot of rescue dogs.
Father of 2, Peter was a daily visitor with his 2 dogs to the Heath, just a few miles from his home in Banham. Tragically, on the morning of his death, his wife Anne had gone in search of him when he hadn't returned home.
Been shopping, and on my way back, I was driving by, and Anne pulled out her car and drove towards Harling. I thought that was rather unusual for her to go out and leave the house empty without them being out together. I didn't think much more of it than that.
Mr. Wrighton had failed to return home, and Mrs. Wrighton became concerned and actually drove out to the Heath to look for her husband in case possibly he'd had a medical event or become lost. As she approached the scene, she made herself known to the police, who were already there.
While Peter's wife is escorted home, his body is taken for a post-mortem examination to verify the cause of death.
When the post-mortem took place, it was established that he had received quite a violent attack, probably initially from behind. Many of the stabbing injuries were to the back of his neck and a cut across his throat that actually cut all the way back to the spinal column. May have taken 4 or 5 sideways cuts. It almost severed his head. There were other significant injuries, a stab wound that went into his left eye.
The result immediately changes the course of the investigation.
We had a phone call from Anne informing us that Peter had been murdered.
But what had gone on? Why would someone want to kill such a well-respected member of the community in such a violent way? In the quaint countryside of East Harling, a post-mortem examination has just revealed that far from being killed by a wild animal, much-loved pensioner Peter Wrighton had been murdered. But why?
I think someone may have put a suggestion forward that it could have been as a result of an animal attack. But when you consider the circumstances, it would appear the way he had been deposited, he had been dragged backwards and his arms were on top of him, which would be unlikely if he was pulled there by an animal.
Mr. Wrighton had been stabbed over 40 times, including some very deep wounds to his throat, which had almost severed his head from the rest of his body.
It was a violent and aggressive attack with only one outcome likely with the way that he was attacked.
Immediately, a murder investigation is launched to track down the killer. And everyone is a potential suspect.
This was the biggest manhunt for a long, long time.
We've got additional officers in the local area at the scene of the murder. We've also increased our patrols and our police visible presence in and around East Tarling.
They were very present, patrolling up and down the road. There was mounted police going around the village on horseback.
At the back of the forest here, the police stopped me all the cars and asking you, what, were you on that day, were you here, taking your name, address and so forth.
Police officers involved in the investigation will have been looking for dog walkers in the area. People have routines and return to places quite regularly, and therefore they will also have people on the heath at the same time, the same day, several days after, to pick up those who regularly go and may have been there in the morning.
As the police were searching the crime scene here, they cut all the grass down really short. All this field was cut very short. All the hedgerow here was cut down to virtually nothing. I guess they're looking for the, for the weapon, I guess.
As news spreads throughout the local dog walking community that there's a killer at large, so does the fear.
When the murder investigation started, nobody was walking the dogs over the woods. They didn't know who it was.
When people first found out about the murder, then I think it was one of complete disbelief that something like that had happened in the area. And then I think probably naturally mixed in with a bit of fear around who was this person that had committed the crime, and were they still at large?
I mean, this was in broad daylight. This was at 10:30 in the morning, potentially. So I think afterwards people were wary. I think people were wary about walking their dogs on their own.
Police established that the 5th of August 2017 started out like any other day for Peter Wrighton.
It was a very typical day for him. He'd been to the shop earlier, he was walking his dogs.
Peter was picked up on CCTV at a local shop at 9:57 a.m. His car was spotted at 10:14 a.m, heading to the heathland to walk his 2 dogs. 30 minutes later, his body was discovered.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
Mr. Wrighton's wallet was still on him. His car keys were still with him, making it unlikely that it was a robbery. The heath really is a friendly area that people go for relaxation and just to walk dogs and just to get out and get some fresh air, etc. It's not somewhere where you would expect this level of violence.
Another potential theory was around other uses of the area. One dog walker who had used the area quite regularly had mentioned to police that he thought there was suspicious activity involving drugs and people buying drugs around that area.
Police quickly rule out a robbery gone wrong. So who would want to cause this quiet, friendly pensioner harm?
The majority of murders occur between people who know each other. And so an initial line of inquiry would be to establish those people who know him and anyone who may have any sort of grudge or dislike or whatever for Mr. Wrighton. You tend to work in concentric circles around the victim, and so you look very close and then you gradually branch out and expand your inquiry, eliminating people as you go.
Peter was quite reserved, he was quite quiet, because he was such a kind, gentle soul, and happily married to Anne. It didn't make any sense. How could somebody be so wicked? To pick on somebody so kind, so loving.
His son and daughter live away and could be easily established as not having been in the Norfolk area, so that would eliminate those family members. And therefore the police then need to look further outside the family unit and expand their inquiries.
You know, we tried to think about people that knew all of us. Could it be anybody that we knew?
Any other significant friendships or relationships before his move to the area?
And we came up with no's everywhere, so it had to be random.
With no obvious clues in Peter's past, police turned to the media and the public for help.
If members of the public have any information at all, even if people think this is a small snippet of information, tell us, because it might be a small bit of information that's the final pieces of the jigsaw that we need. We're really, really keen for anybody that was in and around the area between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Saturday the 5th of August. This was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time, leaving behind a wife and children.
Another major line of inquiry is through the media to try to gain intelligence from and identify members of the public who may have been in the area at the time.
The police had appealed for information, and the initial amount of people coming forward with information was really, really high. We're talking about the hundreds.
It's important you get to people as soon as possible so that that image is as clear as possible in their minds.
Intensive questioning of local dog walkers starts to give police some leads.
The day of the murder, I came up the second day, and the policeman said to me, "What are you doing here?" basically. I was a little bit scared because I thought perhaps maybe they would think it was me, because my footprints would be on the soil here and everything, and touch certain things, I guess, and, you know, so forth. DNA, that sort of stuff, I guess. I don't know how that kind of works, but quite scary at the time.
Didn't sink in at first. And then when they're talking about, oh, it happened such and such, and I thought, well, I was in the forest then.
So as part of the appeals, initially the police were wanting to speak to 2 male individuals and gave very detailed descriptions.
Police rule out the 2 dog walkers. But Peter Bibby is pulled in for questioning.
I had an interview at work, an interview at home, where they took all fingerprints, DNA. That's it. Good boy. They even took DNA off the dog, took all my clothes. Good boy. Yeah, it was quite harrowing, but I suppose everybody's a suspect till you're proven innocent.
But unknown to Peter, something he had witnessed on the morning of the 5th of August was about to turn the investigation on its head.
It was a normal day over the heath. Met quite a few new people, which was quite nice, a few of the people that I used to know. Yeah, just a really nice, peaceful day. Yeah, this is the route that I took. I regularly walk this ridge, and this gate wasn't there at the time, so I would come along here, and then I turned down, then walked back through the woods and around circle. Saw somebody walking towards us, and it just didn't look right. He wasn't dressed for walking in the forest. He didn't have a dog. He wasn't with anybody else. It was just totally out of sync.
Through their inquiries, they identified another person who'd been dog walking on the heath at the time, who had spoken to someone who seemed out of place. Didn't seem to be dressed to be walking, didn't have a dog. You know, dog walkers tend to, it's not a uniform they wear, but they tend to dress in similar ways and know who looks in or out of place.
On his feet, he had like heavy-duty flip-flops and a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. Very smartly dressed and was totally out of character for walking dogs in the forest. We were both walking up wheel ruts of a car. So I was walking up the right-hand one, he was coming down the left-hand one. When we actually passed, he was about this far away from me. I could have put my hand out and touched him. If I hadn't said hello to him, he'd have definitely walked past me and wouldn't have given me the time of day. There was no chance of any eye contact, not even any fainted little glances. He had his head forward and he was just walking forward and ignoring everything. And then he went on, and then I was wondering to myself, what's he doing? Where's he going? It's not right.
He provided an e-fit of this person that became very key to the investigation later on.
I do regret not following him to see where he went. Yeah. And that's sort of like bugged me for a while.
Suddenly, police have a description of a man they believe could hold the key as to what went on that morning on the heathland. They release an e-fit. But who is this man? And is he a killer? The rural Norfolk countryside is still reeling 6 days after 83-year-old Peter Wrighton was murdered on the heathland while walking his dog.
Shocking events such as these have a significant impact on the community. One of the first things the local police inspector will do is a community impact assessment to try and reach out to the community and reassure them that the police are doing as much as they can to protect them and to resolve whatever the incident is that's happened.
Such a shock for this area because it's so safe and so sort of old-fashioned in a way. I guess you leave your doors unlocked, you have keys in your car, and no one expects you to get murdered. It's just quite bizarre. Afterwards, people are quite scared of walking the dogs in the forest.
Police still have no suspects, no murder weapon, and no motive.
I think any time there has been a murder in these sort of circumstances and no one's been found, there's likely to be wariness, there's likely to be some people who sadly won't want to leave the house. That shock was always there, I think. It was random, it was unprovoked, it literally could happen to anybody.
It wasn't safe for any of us. If there's a murderer already, it's murdered Peter. Was it something personal or not? We didn't know. After the murder of Peter, I was very reluctant to leave the house.
Having turned to the public for help, police receive information about a man who had stood out on the heath on the morning of the murder.
I just saw his feet first, and I thought he's wearing like heavy-duty flip-flops. It's not the sort of attire that you'd think of going dog walking. Pair of shorts on. Most people don't wear shorts through there because of the nettles, bits of bracken and all sorts of stuff like that. He was walking with a purpose.
Police release an e-fit of the man described, and suddenly there's a breakthrough. Police receive a tip-off about a local man, 24-year-old Alexander Palmer.
So, following the police appeals, a psychiatrist who had worked with Alexander Palmer then came forward with some concerns around previous things that Palmer had said.
The psychologist told the police that when treating Alexander Palmer, he had ideations of violent attacks, often with a knife.
Palmer had talked about his desire to attack random people. The voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Once Alexander Palmer was known to the inquiry, he was allocated to a team of detectives as a person of interest. Having obtained a photograph from Facebook, it was immediately apparent that there was a very strong likeness with the e-fit that had been provided by one of the dog walkers.
So at the time we knew that Palmer was 24 years old and he lived in Cringleford in Norfolk, and he had previously been a part of the armed forces.
Having identified Alexander Palmer as a suspect, an arrest strategy was prepared and he was arrested at 4:40 the following morning.
News of the arrest quickly spreads.
I wasn't sleeping. quite paranoid about it all. I always kept looking at my iPad, to see if there'd been any updates. And I think there's one at 3 o'clock in the morning, the first published Alexander's name. So quickly thought I'd have a look at Facebook, and lo and behold, there he was. As soon as I saw him on Facebook, I realised that was him. Without a shadow of a doubt.
After Alexander was arrested, they'd informed Anne, and Anne informed us that someone had been arrested for it, which was a relief for us.
As part of the arrest strategy, having been brought into custody, various forensic samples and a DNA swab will have been taken from Palmer, which will have been fast-tracked to the laboratory to try to get a profile as soon as possible. Having an outstanding profile from Mr. Wrighton's trousers, they need to know as soon as possible whether there could be any link to Alexander Palmer.
With forensic evidence being processed, Palmer himself is brought in for questioning.
Alex, can I get you to introduce yourself, please? Alexander Hobbs Palmer. As I said, the EFIT was prepared from a description. Have a look at that. What would you say about that?
That's a pretty good likeness.
Alexander admitted that he had been in the area at the time.
During the first interview, Palmer revealed that he had been in the area. He said that he had travelled there and feeling depressed, he had stood there and had cried to himself and had walked about and then returned to his car, parked somewhere separately and had another walk and then left the area.
He was quite adamant about it, that he had not done it. He was not the killer. There was a Roman road that dissected the wood. Mr. Wrighton had been killed on the west side of the road. Alexander said that he'd been on the east side at all times. I found him to be pretty calm, composed. He was intelligent.
Despite Palmer's denials, on the ground, detectives worked tirelessly to find evidence to link him to the crime.
You're looking for something that will link him to the scene, something that will link him to Mr. Wrighton. So you're going to look for any clothes that have been worn at any locations that he's been to, so a house, lockup, work, vehicles that he may have used, looking to seize as many items as possible to initially assess them and then send them for forensic examination.
And it isn't long before forensic investigations start to produce results.
It was the second day of interviews that the positive result on the DNA matching Alexander Palmer to the DNA profile found on the trousers, probably where he dragged Mr. Wrighton into the bushes, grabbing his trousers to pull him along.
What could be his DNA was found on Mr. Wrighton's trousers, and what could have been Mr. Wrighton's blood was found on the collar of a jacket that belonged to Alexander.
That was the main evidence to link Alexander Palmer to Peter Wrighton, and obviously that then entered into the interview strategy.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
I'm afraid I can't without knowing.
You don't need to know. It's irrelevant where it is. You say you haven't met him. Why is your DNA on him?
For instance, I could have lost a hair follicle and caught on his shoe. That's just me speculating, but without knowing, I couldn't venture a guess.
Okay.
Police now have a DNA link between the two men, but need further proof linking Palmer to the crime.
A search of his car identified a map which had markings on it indicating the area of the heath, which is obviously of interest because it indicates some sort of pre-planning before going to the scene.
There was ANPR data, the number plate recognition, which put Palmer at the location at the day of the murder.
Some ANPR evidence had been recovered with Palmer driving his car in the morning when dropping his partner off in the city, which showed him apparently in a white or light-coloured shirt, and when he was seen picking her up in the afternoon, he was seen in a dark-coloured shirt. And yet his account was that he had been wearing the same clothes all day, but he appeared to have changed his clothing, and none of that clothing, which is highly likely to have been heavily bloodstained, was ever recovered.
Police believe they have irrefutable proof that Palmer killed Peter Wrighton, but they still don't know why or what with, and their suspect is now refusing to talk.
I'll ask you again, were you involved in the murder of Peter Wrighton? No comment.
He made it very clear that he was not guilty, was not responsible, and he hadn't done the killing. And that remained his position throughout.
Detectives analyse Palmer's phone records and come across a damning photograph.
It was established that he had bought a hunting-type knife, and in fact there was a picture of it, I think, on his phone. That picture of the knife was shown to the forensic pathologist, who confirmed that it could have caused the injuries.
Alexander Palmer is charged with murder. But what was his motive? And what drove him to kill? February 2018. And Alexander Palmer is standing trial at Nottingham Crown Court, accused of murdering Peter Wrighton in August 2017. A crime which had sent shockwaves through the small, close-knit community of East Harling.
I think my first initial thought was, whoever done this is a coward. The nature of the frenzy that murderer did, it was a cowardly act on an old man who's out walking dogs.
Totally shocked. I couldn't believe it, because it's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible it could happen here. It just seemed impossible, really.
Prior to the court case, Palmer has to undergo psychological assessments to determine his capacity to stand trial.
I believe he's initially sent to Belmarsh Prison and then to Rampton for that assessment. And the question to be answered was Alexander Palmer mad or bad? Had he carried out this attack because of a mental illness that he was suffering from, or was he just a very violent and nasty person?
So who is Alexander Palmer?
When I first met Alexander, he was 24 years old. He'd been 23 at the time of the offence. He had no previous convictions, no cautions, no findings of guilt, no reprimands, nothing, so far as the police were concerned, that would suggest that he would commit such a violent offence. He'd served in the British Army till about 2015. He had trained and qualified as a commando, one of the few who actually qualified in his year. But there was one thing of note. In March of 2014, a fellow trainee had stamped on his head, and that was plainly the beginning of his mental problems. Because of that, he had been medically discharged from the army.
Throughout 2015, Palmer was treated as both an inpatient and an outpatient in mental health services, seen by several different psychologists, but one expressed concern to the police after seeing media appeals about the murder.
One of the people that contacted the control room was a psychologist who had worked previously with Palmer following an assault on Palmer whilst he was serving in the forces that had an effect on him.
And one piece of information comes to light which is particularly chilling.
The psychologist told the police that he had a dislike for dog walkers.
dog walkers he said were a particular bugbear of his.
He was obviously suffering some mental health problems brought on by PTSD. He had some kind of grievance with dog walkers is the thing that stands out.
He had made disclosures about ideations around violence and a dislike of dog walkers.
Having been deemed fit to stand trial, the court hears how Alex had revealed on arrest that he heard voices in his head.
Palmer had talked about the voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Is there a different Alex? Times, yes. Okay, who's he?
He used to manifest himself as a physical hallucination, but now it's just a voice.
Is he still with us?
Yes.
Is he here today?
Yes.
Where is he now?
What is him here?
He's there, is he?
Palmer admits being on the Heathlands on the day of the murder.
So was Alex there that day? The other Alex?
He's always there, so
He's always there, so he would have been with you, okay? Was he? Do you remember him talking to you on that day? You don't? But you say he talks to you every day?
Yes.
He's there laughing at you. But you say he doesn't tell you what to do. Doesn't force you to do things or anything like that.
Palmer, during the court case, had said that he had visited the woodland because he was feeling low, but didn't say that he'd been involved in the attack.
But the prosecution puts forward evidence linking Palmer to Peter Wrighton.
Several of Mr. Wrighton's clothes were sent for forensic examination, and they had identified DNA from a person on the leg of his trousers.
I believe there was DNA found on Mr. Wrighton as well, which linked Palmer to the murder.
The court also hears that on the morning of the murder, ANPR cameras picked up Palmer's black Ford Focus on the A11, heading towards the Heath. Mobile phone records reveal he is stationary on the area of the Heath from 10:19 a.m. for a period of 32 minutes and 55 seconds. His car is then picked up heading north on the A11. The whole journey, police believe, had been planned in advance.
A search of his car identified a map with the area marked out.
In fact, investigations reveal Palmer had completed the exact same journey 2 weeks prior to the murder. Had it been a practice run, or had he intended to kill on that day? Either way, it was Peter who found himself at the end of Palmer's wrath on that fateful day.
Why did you pick Peter?
Being that Peter's about my stature and a bit older than I am, Peter was easy prey for Alexander.
But did Peter actually try to help this man? We don't know. Nobody will ever know. Because this man won't say anything now. Did Peter try to help him? Peter suffered for it. We don't know.
It was also revealed that despite his age and smaller stature, Peter had tried to fight off his attacker.
He had what we would refer to as defensive marks on his hand. It would appear that he tried to grab the blade of the knife to stop his assailant.
It was unprovoked, and he was a very, very old man that couldn't defend himself. Alexander's quite a strong lad, you know, military background, very fit and able. Peter Wrighton could hardly stand up. I think very cowardly.
The prosecution revealed further evidence that Palmer had planned to kill. Police had found a notebook in a storage facility belonging to Palmer, in which it appeared he had written of his plans.
So in January of 2015, he said he was thinking of going for dog walkers. He said that he hated dog walkers and that if he did this, he would be up on a pedestal, up with the big ones. Everyone would look up to him. Everyone would know his name.
But while police did discover the notebook, there's one thing they never did find: the knife he used to kill Peter.
The prosecution case would be the steps that he had taken to get rid of any forensic evidence would indicate a knowledge of what he had done and an intention to cover up what he had done.
On the advice of his barrister, Palmer does not give evidence in his trial.
I explained to him that it's his case, his future, his liberty that's at stake, and that we act as a voice for him in the courtroom.
The notebook, DNA, witness statements, and the e-fit, as well as Palmer's medical records, are put to the court.
Prosecution case was a strong one. ANPR evidence in relation to his vehicle and cell site evidence in relation to his phone showed that he had been in the area at the relevant time. In addition to that, there was evidence from 2 eyewitnesses who had given descriptions of the person who was likely to have been Mr. Reitman's attacker. And those descriptions were quite similar to the appearance of Alexander. One of those 2 witnesses had made an e-fit, and again, the e-fit was quite similar to Alexander's appearance. There was no direct evidence, but if you put all those matters together, it represents quite a strong case.
Having heard all the evidence, the jury retire to consider their verdict.
The trial came to a conclusion and the jury found Alexander Palmer guilty of murder.
When a jury decides after 49 minutes, I think there's obviously overwhelming evidence to suggest that Palmer was the person who carried out the murder. That was the one thing that stood out for me at the trial, is how quickly they decided that Palmer was guilty of the murder.
Despite evidence of Palmer's mental health problems, the judge ruled that he had meticulously planned the murder.
The statutory sentence is life imprisonment, but there is a recommendation from the judge, which in this case was 28 years. I would suggest that the fact that once convicted and imprisoned, he was sent to a normal prison rather than a psychiatric prison indicates that the assessment was that he was a violent and nasty person.
Good girl, good girl. Come on.
The dog walkers of East Harling will never forget the horrifying crime which leaves its mark on this close-knit community.
Not the same in the forest here for months. People were not relaxed, they're very nervous, looking over the shoulder all the time. I was doing the same, actually, looking over your shoulder, seeing what the cars were parked here. It was very bizarre, kind of a chilling feeling afterwards.
And for Peter Bibby, his brush with evil will live with him forever.
It was quite a scary thing, and it's all the what ifs. What if I had gone back? You know, would have changed things. I was walking straight forward to him. It could have been me.